Hey, how's it going? It's Dan from modular.dev here. We're going to do another live stream today. I think what I want to do is go over how you can upgrade from Blazor 3.2 to .NET 5. So in May of this year, Microsoft released the first official version of Blazor Web Assembly using .NET 3.2. And recently, they merged it into .NET 5, which releases in November. So if you want to get a head start and get up to date on some of the preview releases, you can do that now. As of Preview 7, the WebAssembly version of Blazor has been merged into .NET 5. So I'm going to show you how to upgrade that. I'm going to show you some of the new features that they've come out with, and hopefully you can learn something cool today. So I'm about to create a new project here. I just named it Blazor.NET 5, and this is going to be using the .NET 3.2 template that will come installed on your computer. Now, I do want to point out, to use .NET 5 and to use some of these features, you're going to have to use Visual Studio Preview. I downloaded the Community Edition, but feel free to download whatever edition you can get. So you'll notice here we have a .NET 3.1 and .NET 5. However, I'm going to start with .NET 3.1 because that's probably where a lot of you are if you have an existing WebAssembly application. If you're creating a new one, obviously just start with .NET 5. But for the sake of showing you, I'll start with 3.1. So I'll go ahead and choose WebAssembly app, and usually I'm going to check these two boxes. ASP.NET Core hosted, if you want to have a server-side component to this, and progressive web application. Now you don't have to check those, but I will check them for the demo. Alright, so first thing we see here, if we run it, I'm going to run it in Canary, is the standard counter application that you see when you create a Blazor application. So nothing really new here, but this is on .NET 3.2. So let's go ahead and get this upgraded to .NET 5. The first thing you're going to want to do is go into each of your projects and change the target framework from .NET 2.1 standard or whatever it says to .NET 5.0. .NET 5.0 is going to be the .NET 5 version of the framework. So that's what you want. So do that for all three projects, or as many projects as you have in your application. I'll go ahead and do it for these three. The next thing you got to do is upgrade any Nuget packages that you have. So if you look here on the server project, we have webassembly.server referenced. So to edit your Nuget packages, you can go into the Manage Nuget Packages here by right-clicking your project. So we'll go to Manage Nuget Packages, and if you got this Include Pre-Release checkbox, you'll be able to get the 5.0 preview releases. If you're watching this after the 5.0 is out in November, then obviously you don't have to check that box. Just grab the 5.0 release. But for now, we got to check the box and grab the preview release. So I'm going to hit Update. Alright, same thing for the client. The only difference is, for the client, we no longer need this webassembly.build because it's actually part of the tooling now, or whatever. I'm not sure how they do it, but anyways, we don't need this Nuget package anymore. We can uninstall that. Okay, and then these other three, we'll just update all three of them. Okay, that's mostly it. There's one other small thing we have to do. If you look in the notes that I put for this video, or in the description of this video, you'll see a link to the ASP.NET Core updates in .NET 5 Preview 7. I'll bring that over here. And there was just a couple other minor things you had to do, and that was change Razor Lang version 3.0 or delete that and add these two things. So if I'm gonna go ahead and grab that and put that in place of this. Now I do want to point out that you may run into an issue publishing this. Hopefully they get that fixed relatively soon, but it has to deal with the runtime identifier. If you have a question on that, just let me know. I think I covered it in one of my other videos of how to publish that, but for now, this will be good. We should be able to run this. All right, so we're able to run it as before, this time using .NET 5, which is great because now we have access to C#9 and we have access to all these other great things that they're doing unrelated to WebAssembly that they've already been working on for months now. So if you can utilize any of those, definitely do so. As far as Blazor WebAssembly though, there wasn't a whole lot in Preview 7. I think the majority of it was just moving it over. Preview 8, however, there was a good number of things. So I also linked the Preview 8 one in the description, but I'll bring it up here as well. So they added a good number of things: Azure Active Directory authentication, CSS isolation, lazy loading, and so on and so forth. I picked out a few of them that I was kind of excited for to go over today, but definitely check some of these out if you're interested in them. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one I want to cover is CSS isolation, which is pretty cool. In order to really show that, I want to create a modal that we can pop up by clicking a button. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a components folder, and inside that components folder I'm going to add modal.razor. Okay, and we just have this blank razor file here. Oops, I'm going to add @code at the beginning, and I think this is going to take 3 parameters. The first one is whether or not the modal, and when I say modal, I'm talking about a thing that pops up over top of your website that a person can then cancel out of or take some action on. So I'm going to make this modal have a property for open, and I'm going to have a event callback open changed. And what that event callback open changed is going to allow us to do, this is going to allow us to bind a variable to this. So if I come into the index page, for example, I'm just going to get rid of this. I can add a reference to this modal now. And I can set open equal to false. But what I really want to do is I want to bind open to some variable on this page. That way I can control whether or not it opens or closes, and get notified if it opens or closes. So from the modal end. So I'm going to create a code block here, and we'll just make a private bool modal opened. I'll just default that to false. Okay. And now we'll just put a button here that when it is clicked, then modal opened will get set to true. And we'll just say that the button has the text of open modal. So let's just look and see what it looks like right now. Alright, just says open modal, and it doesn't really do anything. So let's go ahead and add one more property to the modal, and that would be the content that gets displayed inside of it. So that's actually going to be what's called a render fragment, And there's a special name for the default render fragment, which is child content. So what that allows us to do then on the index page is it allows us to put something in here like hello world, and that's going to show up when we open the modal. This, whatever is inside here, in this case, it's a paragraph tag with hello world inside. So that's going to show up when we open up this modal. As long as we render it. So we just got to put @child content here. Let's go ahead and run this again. And right now we're not doing anything with that open flag, so it's gonna make it seem like it's open already. And this button doesn't really do anything. So let's go ahead and just hide it if it's if open is false, and show it if it's true. So we'll just set hidden equal to not open. So if it's not open, it's hidden. Let's go ahead and try this. This should work now. Okay. We have no way to close it yet, but if you saw that, we didn't have it open at the beginning, and now we opened it. So let's add some styling to this modal to give it a little bit of a look. So let's put a class of I'm gonna call it dmodal. I think there's some other modal class that Bootstrap is probably gonna try to use if we just put the word modal there. But if you didn't have Bootstrap, like by default, Blazor has Bootstrap, so that's why I have to be concerned about that. And then in here, I'm gonna just make another div and give it a class of content. So this will be the modal content, and we'll just put that inside. So now we can add a new feature of Blazor Web Assembly, which is the style sheets that are internalized to this Razor component. So if you look at that document, it's called Css Isolation for Blazor components. And what you do is you define the Razor component, or the component name .razor.css. So let's go ahead and do that. If I make a modal.razor.css, now I can start styling some things. So if I look at the class of dmodal, because that's the class that we're in here, I can give it some properties. So if I give it a width of the entire viewport and a height of the entire view height, and put it at the very top and the very left, and position it absolute. Now I can also put a background on this modal by putting a div class equal background. And in my CSS, I can go ahead and do dmodal space background, and we'll just give this a width of 100%, height of 100%, and give it a background of transparent black. So with that being said, I also want to put a little bit of I need to have a white background on this content, otherwise you're not going to be able to read the words. So let's go ahead and put dmodal content, and we'll just put a background of white. And what I want to do here is I want to not make the actual pop-up take up the whole screen, but maybe part of it. So let's put position absolute, width 60%, height 40%, left 30%, and top 20%. Whoops, no, all the way around for those. Okay. let's just see what this looks like right now. If everything worked okay, we should be getting this CSS in our application. And I don't think we're going to, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so if you notice, we didn't get any CSS here. If I inspect this element, I'm not seeing any of those styles that I just made. And the reason for that is because this style sheet needs to get linked on the page, and you can't just reference modal.razor.css. You actually have to reference a special file, which they talk about a little bit in this document. Let's see where it is. It's this framework scoped.styles.css. So all of the styles that you write that's part of a Razor component is going to get bundled together into this. Maybe at some point they'll allow you to customize that file, but as of right now, that's what's going to happen. So let's go ahead and add a reference to that file to our index.html. So link href, just paste that in there. And that's a style sheet. Okay. Now, hopefully, we'll pull in those styles. It doesn't appear to. Let me just refresh. Sometimes, there we go. With the service worker, sometimes you have to refresh your page, or otherwise you might have cached things. So we kind of have this nice, I mean, not really nice yet, but it's this modal kind of popping up. And you can imagine we might have a close button or a header on this modal. But now you can see that this component is using this style sheet that's tied to it. So if I made a duplicate modal, if I made a red modal or something like that, I'll just copy all of this information. Red modal.razor.css. And this time, instead of black, I'm going to make it kind of transparent red. But you'll notice they both have this dmodal class, and they both are using style sheets that reference dmodal. So normally, one of them would win, and they both would have that style. But let's go ahead and make another button here so you can see that that's not the case. So if I add a reference to red modal here, and I'll make another variable called red modal opened. And we'll make another button that says open red modal. That's going to set red modal open to true. Let's go ahead and see what happens here. Actually, before we do that, we need a way to close the modal. Otherwise, we will never be able to click it twice. So let's go ahead and we'll put a onClick event on the background that either the red or the black background, depending on which one we're on. And that click event is just going to set open to false. Alright, is that, what's the problem here? Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Apparently, okay, I don't need a semicolon there. And I'll copy that over to the red modal. Okay, will this work? Let's find out. Alright, so we open the black one. We can close it. We open the red one. We close it. And the black one is still there for some reason. Let's try this. I think what's happening is the binding isn't getting set back because we changed it to open to false here, but the next time that this this thing re-renders, it doesn't know that it got set to false because we didn't actually call open changed. So let's go ahead and add a call to open change. I'm going to create a private boolean for open, and on the getter I'm just going to return open. Let me format this a little bit. And on the setter, I'm going to check if value not open, open equals value, on open changed dot invoke open. Sure. And that's going to say, okay, this changed, so update your binding. I think that's what we were missing. Let's go ahead and try this again. And again, if you have any questions on any of these things as I'm going over it, feel free to ask it during the live stream or afterwards. Definitely, I'm willing to help you with any questions you have. So let's go ahead and try this again. Yep, that worked. Now we... oh, we did not add that same logic to the red one. Let's go ahead and... there. There we go. So how does this actually work, you may be wondering? Let's look at it. Alright, so hopefully you can see my screen, the styling over here. What actually happens is Blazor behind the scenes is putting a scope identifier on the component. So in this case, this modal is B-RR and so on. Whereas if I were to open the red modal, it's B-D0AA and so on. So the scope that it's adding there actually gets added to the CSS when it compiles. So our scoped.styles.css actually has both of them in there, and they have a scoped identifier on each one. And that's how it keeps them separate. So an interesting little trick. I think they borrowed it from Vue, if I remember hearing that correctly. So anyway, that is CSS isolation. What else do we want to go over? Let's see. They added lazy loading. I'm probably not going to cover that in this, but definitely check that out if you're worried about performance of DLLs that are getting loaded when they may not need to be. Let's go ahead and look at the input radio component. So if I add, let's get rid of this red modal because we're done with that for now. If I add an edit form inside my modal, previously the only way I could add a radio button would be the input type radio. Which is fine, but there's no way to really bind your value successfully to that radio button because this is a HTML component, not a Blazor component. But in this release, they added the input radio group and the input radio component, and now you can bind the value of the radio button to something in the back end. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to make a class called age, and that's going to have a label and a value. And we'll make a list of those when we enter this component. So this will get initialized when it first opens up. And we'll call that ages, and there's a new list of age, and we'll initialize it with some values here. So new age label equals under 13, value equals you know what, instead of value, let's call it something different. Let's call it minimum age. This is the minimum age you can be to be in this age bracket. So in this case, under 13, your minimum age is 0. Alright, so we'll add another one and another one. In this case, the label is going to be teenager with a minimum age of 13. And the last one will make an adult with a minimum age of 18. Okay. So now what we can do is we can have, let's create a selected age. Public, well, it doesn't have to be public. Age, selected age. And we'll just set that to null for now. And maybe underneath our form, we'll have you must be at least selected age dot minimum age years old. So this is going to dynamically change depending on what radio button we choose, which up until now was not possible with Blazor Web Assembly, at least not easily. So let's go ahead and also just for completeness, we'll make sure selected age is not null. Okay. And for our edit form, we'll put the model as selected age. Actually, no, we'll set that to, we'll make this a string. It doesn't need to be an age. We'll just make it a string. And then this would be just like that. So let's just go ahead and say for each var age in ages. Again, ages is our list of ages. We're going to create a radio button for it. So we'll make a label, and then inside that label we'll put input radio, and we'll bind the value of that, or we'll put the value of that radio button equal to age dot minimum age, and then we'll put age dot label here, so we have some text for that. And that should be all we have to do. Let's go ahead and also bind the value of this whole group, and this is where you're going to bind this to something. We'll bind this to the selected age variable that we have. So whenever this gets updated, this selected age is going to get updated with the selected minimum age. Let's go ahead and try this. Okay, you must be at least blank years old. Now we can change this, and it will update in real time without having to submit the form or anything like that, which is great. That's what it's there for. It would be even better if we could bind to an entire age, which is what I was going to do, but I remembered actually that it didn't work. So it would be nice if you could bind it to the selected age here and just set the value to age. And that way you'd be able to do something like selected age dot minimum age, and maybe you'd have other properties here, in which case you could bind an entire object to a radio button, which would be pretty cool. But it doesn't quite work. In fact, it appears to work. The compiler makes it seem like it's going to work, but you start to get well, hold on. I think this needs to just set, I think I can't have a null age here. Maybe that's the problem. Let's try this again. Okay. So when you click one of them, you have this big, huge, like, binding error. I think it's trying to convert it to a string, which is odd because we said that it was an object, not a string. Maybe this is something that they'll fix. I know this just came out with the preview release. It would be really awesome if we could bind this to an entire object. That'd be really sweet. So I guess keep your eye out for that. But for now, it's got to be a string. So I'm gonna back this back out. Okay. Let's see. What else did they add? They added. Oh yeah, the focus. So you may want to have a like a text box or something like that. So input. I don't have to put type equals text. I'll just put just input, I guess. And maybe next to it we'll have a button that when you click it, it puts the focus in this text box. And in order to do that, what we need to do is, I'll just put a label on this button real quick. What we need to do is we need to create a reference to this input. So we can use that, we can use element reference here. Input, that's fine. And here we just put ref equals input. And now when we click it, we can just do input.focus async. I'm not sure why it needs to be async, but it is apparently. So now when we click it, we should focus into that text box. Let's try that out. I got a lot of these open. Okay, so my cursor is not over there. Now I click focus text box, and now it's there, which is great. You may want to use that to focus something. Maybe when a modal appears, you want to focus it in the first field, or something like that. I did have a slight problem with doing that because you have to do the focus after the modal is appearing on the screen. Otherwise, you can't focus to an element that is hidden. So if you do that, make sure to show the modal first, then focus it. You should be fine. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out is, if you notice, I had to use a regular input instead of an input text. And it would be nice to be able to use an input text, because then I could bind the value to something. The problem is the element reference. If we used it here, let's go ahead and get rid of this. It looks like it's going to work, but when we actually try to run it, we get an error, because this on an input text, the element reference is something different. It's actually an input text. So I could change this here to input text, but now input text doesn't have focus async anymore. So there is a GitHub issue on that. I can link to it in the description. Maybe they'll fix it. I'm assuming they will at some point. But anyways, right now you can only do it on like these kind of components, not their built-in components. Last thing I wanted to go over was influencing the HTML head in Blazor apps. This is a big one actually for me, because I have a pretty big app that I use Blazor Web Assembly on, and whenever you change the page, it doesn't update the title up here. Whereas normally, whenever you change the page, it's got the title up here. So let me just get rid of this so it's not too cluttered. And run it again, and just take a look at the title up here. It says Blazor.NET 5. If I switch to counter, you would like it to switch to counter up here. If I switch to fetch data, I'm not sure what that error is, but anyways, you'd want it to say weather forecast or something like that up here. So how you can do that is actually fairly simple. You can add a title, uppercase title, to this. But you need to add, I believe, some other Nuget package first. Yes. Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Components Web Extensions. Let's go ahead and add this package to our client application. All right, and I'll install that. And I probably will also put that in the imports so I don't have to keep importing this everywhere I go. It's .head. So now I should be able to do, let's give IntelliSense maybe a minute to catch up, I guess. Let's see what's going on here. There it is, title. Now we can set this, we can set the value of the title to whatever we want. So maybe in this case we'll say counter. And that's it really. So now maybe in this one you would say weather forecast. And in this one maybe you would just say homepage or something like that. So I think there's one other thing we need to add. Let's go ahead and try it first. So yeah, we get an error. And the error is could not find Blazor Head Manager in window. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to use the Blazor Head Manager to update these items in the header of the HTML document. So what we need to do, if you go back to that document there, is add this whole thing to our index.html. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. That should be the last thing we have to do. Let's go ahead and try this again. We got one more error here. And, well, let me refresh it one more time. It may be the service worker. Yep, that's what it was. So, again, whenever you have a service worker, you kind of have to worry about it caching things. Usually the service worker is not going to update until the next time. But anyways, that's what it was. So now it says homepage. If I switch to counter, it's going to switch it there, which is really nice. I'm going to use that all the time. And there's other ones too. It's not just title. If you want to take a look at the other things, there's the link and meta components too. So if you want to put items in there that maybe reference like social media images and just like descriptions and things like that, so that your website appears correctly when somebody references it on Facebook or something like that. Definitely you're going to want to update the meta descriptions and things like that here. But anyway, those are the I think 4 or 5 things that I wanted to go over. Definitely a whole lot here, so go ahead and check out the rest. Again, I'll have this linked in the description below. There's going to be a few other things before .NET 5 gets officially released. There's a release candidate preview, or release candidate 1, release candidate 2 and 3 as well. So if you ever want to look at that, you can go to the ASP.NET Core GitHub and go to the milestones here. And here you can see all the different milestones. Here's the release candidate 1, and you can see what all they're planning for release candidate 1. Some of the issues that we went over today, they're probably going to fix for that. But I think there's some other fairly large items. Let's see if there was. Big rock. File upload component, that's a big one. That's been missing in Blazor for a long time. So definitely make sure that you're staying up to date as far as what all you can use for Blazor in .NET 5. But pretty much the release candidate 1 is going to be the final one with major features as far as I'm aware of. And the other ones, the release candidate 2 and the actual release, are just going to be fixing some minor issues. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. I think probably next time I'm going to start on Cosmos DB. Just maybe a couple things there as far as what that is and how NoSQL, how maybe you can choose between NoSQL and a standard SQL database. And then after that, I may start some kind of new beginner tutorial for HTML developers or something like that. If you have something that you want me to cover, though, definitely let me know, and I will try to get it on the schedule. And if you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to me in the comments. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.